What's up, folks? Casual Dad here to talk about The Hunt is On. What we're looking at is Skarbrand, the exiled one, who is, if you're not familiar, the, I believe, greatest champion of the blood god Khorne, is one of the four main chaos gods in the Warhammer universe. And Skarbrand was such an impressive champion that he got so cocky that he actually attacked Khorne. Like he directly attacked the blood god Khorne and got his butt kicked and apparently got all of his personality wiped out. And so now he is just a mindless rampaging murder machine. So he's not the most interesting character at the moment, but his backstory has that kind of tragic fall type deal. It's kind of fun. Um, and in some of the early, if you read any of the Horus Heresy books, you'll find there are moments where Skarbrand is actually a brilliant tactician and really messes with particularly the Blood Angels. I think he's beaten by Sanguinius, Dante, Gilliman, and just like epic confrontations where they banish him back to the warp. But of course, he keeps coming back because he's a demon. But anyway, Skarbrand is a bodyguard I don't have, and he is the top tier reward card for this competitive season of Warhammer Combat Cards. And I want him. I don't have him. I want this card because look at this. Look at this. It'll take a really long time to get there, but he's not in the general pool. If I do get one copy of him, I can start getting the drops. And I just played a really competitive season last season, which set me up really well for this season. So I'm not pulling any punches. I'm going straight to the top of Terra, and I'm going to try to make sure to hit that top 6% this month, excuse me. And yeah, so I wanted to take a little second to talk about that and then talk about the decks I'm using to get there and some of those general tactics that I've talked about before. So the way the seasons work, you get that season reset where at the end of the season, all of your trophy counts get roughly halved down to like a specific total. I don't remember exactly what it is, but if you had your top four up around 3K, 3,000 trophies each, they end up going down to around 12 each. And so you have to grind your way back up to Terra, which is 9,000 total trophies combined from your top four, and then grind up to closer to top 6% is usually around 13,000 trophies. So I've got a ways to go. Yeah, so 13,000 trophies, and it's usually comfortable if you can get to 14,000. So I have to take my heaviest stuff, my most competitive, and then the single biggest difference between a relatively high level player and a very top tier player is time. And that's both time played, just the number of games you play and the number of wins you have over a specific amount of time, and then also when you choose to play. So after the rank reset, you have a much better time of just this completely flat pool where every single deck is roughly the same level. And if you grind really hard in the first week, you'll tend to have a lot of very easy matches and progress very quickly. However, if you play up against decks that are rated lower than yours, which you will fairly quickly if you're playing early in the season, if you're one of the players grinding early, then your decks will very quickly become higher ranked than other players, even if those other decks will be higher ranked later in the season. It's just not that many people hit it that hard early on. If you lose to a deck that's lower ranked, you take a much bigger penalty in trophies. So you want to play your most powerful decks that are going to win, that are going to get you those hits as quickly as possible. And we're up against a Greyfax deck. And so I'm going to talk about the actual decks I have in here. So first off, this is Snickrot. This is a variant of the Orc deck that I ran. Yeah. That I ran at the end of last season. And I'll look at the deck in a minute. I just wanted to go ahead and play the game because I'm trying to power through these. But so just to talk about the top factions I'm running, it is going to be Servants of the Emperor, Orcs, Tyranids, and then Eldari. And the usual suspects for all of those, especially it's going to be for Orcs. Obviously, it's going to be Snickrot, who is an absolute monster. And I should comfortably take this out. Yeah. And just the trophy count, I'm at 1960 right now, which is quite high. So I really, really don't want to lose this, but I'm fairly comfortable against the 1500. Let's save up that Psychic. Why not? I should have saved up. I should have gone melee. Oh well. Kyrie or Draxus, but I still have 5 in deck. This is an easy win. Easy win. I say that and then almost immediately lose. I think, yeah, comfortably. It's probably a waste. No, that'll work. Boom. Snickrot again being the one whose cards do double damage if they do any attack off lane. Barrage, Psionic Blast, or just shooting off lane for target acquired, or just because the lane in front of them is clear. So I really like this deck because it leans pretty heavily on... Any second now. There we go. So you've got that precision shot, a really, really hard precision shot. Got Barrage. You've got both Warp Surge, so you do a psychic attack on the drop, and then Psionic Blast. And then the double target acquired to go ahead and trigger those offlane attacks, shields for defense, and then double taunt, both of the cheaper taunts. This deck will just keep getting better, especially once I get that secondary trait with this guy. When I get Death Blow here, it's on. But yeah, he's the only low-level card in here, and all the others you can see are quite high. I would say that you can fairly comfortably get to top 6 or top 10 or top 6% fairly comfortably, TM, if your cards have primary trait rank 3. So if you're talking about a common, you're looking at level 10. If you're talking about an epic, you're talking about level 7. If you're talking about a legendary, you're talking about level 5. So legendaries are pretty good fairly early, but of course they get much better closer to 7 and 8, where you're pushing that primary trait 3. And of course your epics are going to be absolutely tip-top when you start hitting that secondary trait. So that level 9 for epics is a great sweet spot. And then for your commons and rares, you're looking at level 8. But of course, they just keep getting better as you get higher level. But progression slows down so much that most of the decks you're playing against are nowhere close, are usually in this level, because they park there for a very long time. Unless players have really, really heavily invested in a single clan dedication, put a lot of wild cards in, and tried to get those for a while. So this is my Orc deck again. This is the only Orc deck I'm running because none of my other Orc stuff comes even close to being competitive at this level. But Snickrod is so good that this deck is one of my absolute top tier decks, even if it's the only one in the faction. Now I've got the opposite problem with some others here. So next up is my Eldari. I'll go ahead and go backwards first. Another thing too is talking about that time. You want to be really efficient with your play time. So you don't just want to, so we'll go ahead and do this. You don't just want to win and play a lot of games. You want to play games that will also end quickly. So someone like Illic is really good to finish games quickly because his whole trait is you hit something really hard with ranged, even if you don't kill it outright, if you do more than half of its hit points. I think if you do 60 health to it in a single turn of ranged shooting, even if it's from multiple attacks, it just kills it outright. Which makes it very easy to chainsaw through weaker decks, and especially kind of heavier, swarmier decks. Let's see how this goes. And he's fast, so I usually do end up chainsawing through stuff quite quickly. And I don't have precision shot. Excellent. But I've got that heavy range ready. I should, yeah, fairly comfortably take out the chicken. Yep, there. See, so that just insta-killed 2 that I didn't actually do lethal damage to. Whoa. There it is. And this is what I'm talking about, where you want to have fast games as much as possible. And even warlords are vulnerable to that instant kill. So that is something definitely to watch out for when you're playing against Illic, but also when you're playing with Illic. This guy is awesome. When you get that trait rank 3, that super regen, it's a good time. I really wanted to give the kill to my little Dire Avenger, but that's okay. So that's how quickly you can knock out games. There will be a ceiling with Illic where if the opposing deck has a bunch of shields or fear is fairly thick and defensive and or taunt and is able to absorb some of your alpha strike and you start losing cards, that one can fall apart pretty quickly. So as we get to higher level, and just if I'm mixing it up, I will be switching to Lilith instead. And we'll take a quick look at that deck and talk about some variants here. Freezing up a bit. Clicking in the wrong places. Anyway, I'll just go ahead and narrate while I'm waiting for this stuff to load. Illic really likes very, very high ranged attack. He really likes precision shot and barrage because if it's your turn, you play a precision shot, and then you can follow up with your primary attack. That is a much bigger chance to punch through something or multiple things and trigger Illic's instant kill on up to 2 cards. Especially Morgan Ra at this level, he can take out up to 3 or more cards. If there's endless, he can take out an entire wave and then take out a second wave if you hit them hard enough. So lots of readies. The ready's good. I could do with some Inspiring Presence in here. I've got the Wraith Lord in here just for, mostly for kicks, but also just because he's a really good kind of truck to sort of park in the middle and absorb hits. But he could be swapped out for one of the bigger Eldari tanks that does precision shot, or especially this thing I just got in the card shop like today, so it's not very helpful. This guy. This would be a dream Illic card, but I've got a long way to go to get him up to that level 9 where he'd really hold out there. So anyway, that's Illic. So let's go ahead and take a look at Lilith, who is going to be the deck that I run in the later tiers when I get up into Terra, when I'm trying to push that 14,000 trophies. Lilith. And note, when you do switch warlords, it does kind of move your deck points around. So here, I got lucky in the card shop. This guy dropped, and I sunk a bunch of gold into getting him leveled up a couple times. He's a common, so leveling up is quite quick. But I think I was here this morning, and then now I'm here because of that card shop, which is great. I also sunk a bunch of wild cards into him because they didn't realize I had a bunch. Let's go ahead and run this one too. We'll gather some trophies here as we're going. But yeah, so just my top tier competitive factions. If I wanted to go thematic, which would have been fun, I would have gone Space Marines because it's mostly Blood Angels that really have the history with Skarbrand. Or I could have gone Chaos, just as like the rival Chaos Warlords and Chaos Gods to go against him. But competitively, my Chaos decks are just not there yet. And Lilith being the one, or Lilith being the one where if your cards get a kill, they pop back to your hand. She is absolutely incredible. It's going to pop both of those. Oh, it's Glogothrox. Oh, that's bad. That's a bad matchup. Because again, Glogothrox, every time one of your cards kills an opponent's card, it loses some of its attack. Let's go ahead and go here. So my cards are going to get less effective over time. The good news is they start so high, and the end game should be really easy because Glogothrox is not very good. That's not really a fair thing to say. I shouldn't just say Glogothrox isn't very good. He is very cheap, so there could be some really nasty bodyguards in here that I have yet to come up across. Man, this is lagging a lot. I hope it's not lagging for you folks watching. Let's see here. Anyway, so this is also a fairly quick warlord, which is one of the things that makes her so good at higher level. But she can... Yeah, let's do it. So we'll bump our healer so we get a little bit of extra Medicae bopped in there. And kind of top off some of our main cards here. And he's got this guy in here, which is probably going to really help me. Man, Morgan Ross, he's really losing that attack value fast. Which is probably really going to help me because that means that he doesn't have as many points to spread around in the rest of the deck. Womp womp. And I should comfortably have this at this point. I was a little bit worried, but now I know I have at least one off lane against Glogothrox, so I can hit him without fear. Oh, taunt. Well, that's unfortunate, but... And here again, though it's really good, level 6. Okay, so he's a somewhat lower ranked Glogothrox too, so if I'd lost this, it would have been really bad for me. And Lilith herself does not get to make the finishing blow. So there we go. So that's the Lilith deck. That was a particularly bad matchup had those been higher leveled Glogothrox cards or been a little bit thicker. When my cards started losing their attack damage, that could have gotten very problematic. But I have enough heavy hitters in there that all do the same attack type that I had a lot of overlapping fire, and I was able to clear through that pretty quickly. Now we're going into... Come on. There we go. I don't know what's going on with this. This is super slow tonight. Looking next, we're looking at... I'll go ahead and do Servants. Servants is tricky because I have just so many warlords to choose from. They are insanely powerful. But my Momentum deck, the deck I'm using to clear things quickly, is a recently buffed up Greyfax deck. I just got the drops to get her up to primary trait rank 4, so she is an absolute monster. And I have been running this ridiculous thing. I usually like the just pure Psychers with her, but this one's been really fun. And note that none of these cards is over 10 points. But note their health and attack values when I actually get this started. Yeah, Greyfax is really good because she's... you can game the system a little bit, just to go ahead and talk about it, because she usually runs thin decks, because her trait triggers off of giving your cards bonuses based on the number of dex points you don't spend. So when the matchmaking thing is trying to figure out what it should put you up against, it's putting you up against lower level cards or lower card count decks, because you are running lower card count decks. And so it's very challenging for the system to understand what effective level or what effective power level Greyfax actually has, just because of the way her trait works. But if you look at this, this is a 9-point card, throwing 121 damage with Barrage. Like, Greyfax is bananas, especially in this build, because I've got a bunch of overlapping Barrage and really enjoy it. Well, this one is it? Yeah, level 2, okay. And she herself has just insane stats when you get up there. Because this deck is really budget, so she's got a 65% buff to hit points and attack stats across the board for every single card in this deck. And then she, of course, has that rank 4 Inspiring Presence, so she also supercharges everything on the deck. So look at this, 126. 126 on a 9-point card. Go up against Skulltaker himself. Bring it on, Skulltaker. And then I love this. The 4-point Guardsman in this is 52 range damage and 114 hit points. So this is a very effective, very fast deck. And again, you get favorable matches all the way up. So it wins quickly. You get easier matches. It's just very nasty. And that also could be part of why so many newer players end up matched against Greyfax. Because again, the system has a hard time judging that because it's such a unique balance case. And such a unique case to actually set up like, what should this deck actually be fighting against? So that's Greyfax, but I recently talked to the game designer, Harry. We had a wonderful chat, and he told me that one of the highest level warlords in the game by a pretty significant bit is non-Supreme Commander Vahl. It was one of my favorites and is a very cool warlord. Her trait is just all about durability on defense, so she just gives every single card that deploys in her decks 3 soft shields, where they reduce incoming damage by 30%. And that stacks beautifully with debuff, taunt, and fear. So you end up with just these insanely durable cards. And where it can struggle is it is slow, because it usually doesn't emphasize offense. And it can struggle to finish out games because you don't have the damage. But that's where I've really leaned on poison. So this deck has all 3 poison cards, including her, who recently got the poison trait this season. And I'm doing a lot of psychic attacks and readies to go ahead and apply that poison and sort of preserve my shields as long as possible. So there I've got poison of 2 of those. To build up buffs for haymakers, because one of the great things about Mei Lindy is her attack stats are really high. So she's got poison for the long-term stuff, but then also she just hits like a truck. Doesn't matter against shields, but I wanted to poison that guy. And then we got Gilliman himself. And this is still a fairly early matchup, so this is definitely favoring me. But you can kind of get a sense for how quick and durable this deck is. Watch the attacks back I get on this thing. So got the shields up, that Divine Shield up, and Taunt. So I should have taken 48, I took 24. It cuts damage in half or less. It's just completely insane, the amount of damage those shields are able to absorb with a Taunt card. So Taunt is incredibly valuable with Vahl, because your taunt cards are almost guaranteed to survive not only 1 entire round of shooting, but 2 entire rounds of shooting, which is a value you get out of taunt. There is no other warlord in the game that gets that level of value out of taunt, which is crazy. So that's going to be my top tier deck. I expect that to be the most powerful deck I run in this. And let's take another look at that. We should pause and look at the Greyfax deck real quick too before I talk about the Tyranid deck. There it goes. Just keep clicking too much. Sorry, folks. But yeah, just talk about that one again. It's got all 3 of the medium range poison cards. So it's got the Inquisitor Draxus, Kyria Draxus. It's got Mei Lindy, the Assassin, and then it's also got the 8-point poison as well. The 2 mid-range Sisters of Battle taunt cards. Got Hieronymus Tesla, who's got both regen and then the very, very high ranged attack. He could pretty much be swapped out for anything. I haven't used him very much, but I do have a lot of ranged in here for all of these, and Vahl herself. And then this guy's a backup, just got a hit points buff, and then also just has really good single damage psychic, and also has that psionic blast to clean up boards and wipe shields. So all of this is about offensive pressure to make this a more aggressive Vahl deck, and it's been working really well so far. But this is one I haven't actually tested in the upper tiers, so we'll have to see if this works. But I expect it will, considering how well it's been forming so far. And we'll take a quick stop back in those Greyfax decks. On the way, the Canoness is probably one of the strongest warlords in the game. Servants of the Emperor have an incredible series of options to choose from here. Just so many cool abilities, so much great stuff going on. This is a very similar, you can see some of the very common threads here. I've got these 2 taunt cards because they're a really good combination of cost, actual offensive stats, and hit points. So they're very effective taunt cards for a decent price point. Mei Lindy is really good with poison. I really appreciate that on her. I think that trait change makes her a really good piece. And then, of course, I've got my shields, I've got my Inspiring Presence, and Furious Charge, a Big Game Hunter, and some Endless. I'm always iffy on these guys. It's nice to have the extra body, but anytime you have an Endless card, if it dies in a Canoness deck and triggers her return attack, it could be this guy. So you want every single card in this deck to have a meaningful melee attack, because if you're competing in the upper tiers, this guy getting your bonus attack over any of the other options could actually decide a game for you. So he attacks in melee for, it's 75%, so like 6 damage, as opposed to the 60 that this guy will do, plus Inspiring Presence, or goes a little bit higher. So yeah, the bonus attacks can be game winning, and to lose one to this guy is a real bummer. So I'm iffy on that, but it's been decent so far, so I haven't needed to change it. My one condition I told myself in terms of not pulling any punches is I will not be using Belisarius Call. I don't want to add any more Supreme Commander Call decks to the pool. I don't want to do that. Calling out the nerf. Really excited for the call nerfs, because the end of last season was brutal, and I don't know what happened to the matchmaking that gives you the rotation of Warlords. I was very highly trophied. All my decks were like 3,200 trophies at a certain point. So I was hitting call like every 3 matches, and it was pretty miserable. And I don't know that I won any of those. But so like winning every single game except the ones against Belisarius Call is an argument for something like call in the game, sort of. But it was just totally unfun. The level of healing more than anything was the problem. Just that automatic healing just gives you such a wall to chew through that even if you can tank the bonus damage they do, it doesn't. Yeah. So hopefully I don't run into too much call playing early in the season. Quick tangent here, we already just did one, but early in the season, that first week, you get very fast progression because you get those easy matches. In week 2, more people are playing, so you'll get more challenging matches, which gives you better trophy progression for each win. So weeks 1 and week 2 are the weeks to really, really hit it hard. And then in week 3, you want to peter out a bit. You'll get very, very rewarding matches, but you'll start to lose more games. And then week 4, you don't want to touch it at all if you can. If your decks are on a winning streak, you can keep going, but especially if you are going for that top 6%, you want to get there before week 4, and ideally before week 4, but definitely before the final weekend, because the matches in that final weekend become insane, because that's when the majority of decks that are upper tier actually reach the upper tier, and you'll be matched against them. And the matchmaking in the actual games get dramatically harder then, which is fun, but if you're actually trying to get to that reward tier, you want to be the hare, not the tortoise. But yeah, so this is one of my kind of standard Greyfax decks with the 2 Psionic Blast Psychers. I often swap her out for the Navigator, especially since he just got the hit points buff. But he's not in there now just because I really enjoyed the poison on her, and then also liked having the Inspired Presence in there. And I got her up to level 6, so she's quite something now. Yeah, so these stats plus Greyfax's bonus are nothing, and that hit points pool is huge, especially on a 12-point card. So you want things that are very efficient and ideally have both hit points and decent base attack stats, so they can benefit across the board. And Kyrie is pretty good. She has that all types attacker plus poison, but every single 5 points you spend in a Greyfax deck costs you 5% of your total health and damage in the entire deck. So you really have to be careful what you spend on, which is why this one's been so much fun, because this one has 135 points remaining, which translates to a 65% bonus, which I believe is close to the maximum 75. So if I were able to shave off another, I think 15 points, which would be asking a lot, I would be at max bonus. But this is a nice kind of happy medium with that Inspiring Presence. All of these cards have good base ranged attacks. This has been really, really great. I could go for a higher bonus. I could up some of the stuff for a more powerful punch, but this combination has been very effective. So each of these is punching roughly double, maybe a little bit more than their weight. Yeah, it's good. Okay, and then we've always got Supreme Commander Vahl, who I may end up switching to in the latter parts of the season, depending, because her ability is just completely insane. But those are kind of the most competitive Warlords, and the 3 that I'm going to be using. Greyfax mostly to get up to upper tiers. To really slog through the end, I'm planning to lean on Vahl, and then I may switch around Canoness because she's also very strong. We'll see. We'll see. And then for Tyranids, I could go Parasite. I may switch around some Parasite earlier, but I am going all in on Supreme Commander Gosar, because he is bananas. And I'm very excited to show off this deck. So I saved the quote-unquote best for last, Gosar having the twin ability where anytime you deploy a card, all of the cards left in your deck gain a plus 10% to their attack stats that does stack over time. Endless cards applying the stat twice. And then anytime a card that is 10 points or less dies, it creates a token in your deck of that card, which has the attack stats but not the trait. So the tokens don't have the trait, but they do build up attack stat. And you get something like this guy in here. His base attack is 53, and he's got Big Game Hunter. Let's actually look at it. Well, so I had a really thematic deck that was all Genestealer cults. And then I mixed it around a little bit to put a little bit more in there. Like this Gargoyle. Oh, wait, this is actually... Yeah, this is the better one. Yeah, this one is insane. So I added another Endless card. Wait, what's it? Is this the same Endless? Yeah, okay. So same Churda, Gargoyle, this guy are the same Endless cards. Got him in here. Got this in here, which also gives you an additional token and is a pretty good, and this is only level 8. He could certainly go up a bit, but he also has a good base range stat, so he benefits too. But let's just play through it, because it's a pretty complicated role. Downside to Gosar is he's not hyper aggressive, but the games do still end up being pretty fast. And this is cool. Just to kind of talk through it, again, I had a Genestealer cults deck that was full Genestealer cults that was working pretty well, but there were a couple cards that just didn't work right. So here you want to play your cheaper cards first. Oh, the chicken, eh? So already playing those two cards has added a 20% buff to the attack stats of every single card in this deck. And here it gets a little tricky. It's a full deck, so what you drop can be a little bit limited. So I have to drop something like that already has pretty high base stats. But that's already 100. Already has the 20% buff to attack stats. And I've got that precision shot turning off taunt on, or negating taunt on this, because it's minus 30% damage and plus 15. So it's halving its taunt defense. I can hit it very hard, very quickly. And so you've got a combination of outright aggression early and then also banking stuff for later. And I end up with some really hard hitting late game stuff too. And you're not concerned about losing cards because your cards are, some of them are being pulled back in your deck, and the more you're deploying, the more you're actually building up additional attack stats. So you're front loading a little bit, and again, you see it going off every time an Endless card, the first copy of an Endless card dies, I am getting that attack stat buff going on in my deck too. So looking at this guy, he's got a 60% buff to all of his attack stats, which is really good when you get to this guy. Yeah, it builds up. So I could, at any point here, start deploying my scarier cards. I don't know that I want to yet. He does have the psychic buff. That's pretty low level. We'll do that. And then this guy to get the build a little bit more buff for the later cards that drop. So I mean, that is just banana. So he just hit for over 100 damage. He's going to do it again, and his melee is 200 damage. Like, that is just completely crazy. Yeah, and we're going to see some of the fun tokens later. And another crazy thing here too is I'm sitting on 6 cards in my deck still, where Abaddon is by himself. And these are going to quickly chainsaw through this stuff. So this guy's held in my deck, 95 with Big Game Hunter. And then to really finish this out, we're going to go ahead and throw our extremely buffed Barrage card in there, 116 before Fear, 64, which will comfortably finish off this guy and take that shot from the right. So here I've got Big Game Hunter charged up, weakened from Fear shot that'll finish off this guy, and then this will hit from the side. So this may be lethal. It is lethal. Splat! So there we go. And this is just like, I'm very proud of this build. That precision shot and the melee attack on the, that's the Harpy, right? Let me check again. It's loading. Yeah, just that combination of melee and range damage on that thing, plus the precision shot is really, really strong. I think if there was anything I would change about this, I would swap this guy for the, let me show this guy. I would swap around. There are 2 cards I would prefer to use in here if at all possible, and it is scroll. This guy would be absolutely incredible once I get him up to about here, or of course higher. But if I get him up to around here, that Fear trait combined with his really high hit points plus his base stat, like, that'll be incredibly powerful, especially because he's got both the melee and the ranged and the defensive trait. I mean, at max, he'd just be stupid. That guy, and then this guy. who I can never find. This one. Now the points are a little bit tricky because I'm looking at 42 and 46, and I have these guys in here. So this is, Gosar is expensive enough that you do have to be very efficient with points. So what I have in here is a really, really good, like these three are budget versions of the two cards I'm looking at. But these are ones I would definitely consider in here. That one especially because it's got really high melee, very high hit points, in addition to that Barrage and Berserk. But I think this may be better. I forgot to check what it is. The flying thing, I'll check what it is in a minute. But that card is just phenomenal. And I kind of stumbled across using it. I hadn't really thought of it. And now I am never taking Gosar without it. So, of course, you want to play your cheap Endless cards first, where possible. This thing. It is the Hive Crone. Yeah. And it's already almost 100 stats in both attack and melee with the ready. And I haven't even really played that much. I have this guy in here. His base stats are high enough that I don't really... It's fine to go ahead and play him early. Ideally, you want your Endless cards to play first, and that's the downside of running that full deck, because you do end up in moments where, just because of pure randomness, you don't have as much control of what you are playing. But I really think the upside is totally worth it, because he is, yeah, having all of these decks in here gives you so much of an attack buff. What are you doing? You're doing 101, yeah. And even these tokens, I'm going to see if this game lasts long enough for us to get some late game tokens to see kind of how scary they get. And then we talked about the one big game hunter one that I used against Abaddon at the end. That one's base stats are so high, it's just crazy how high that thing can get. And it's kind of good to play it a little bit earlier, because then you have the token in the deck that's charging up throughout the game. And Churda's states are unimpressive, stats, excuse me, but you know, they're not nothing. He's still doing close to 40 damage there every hit, and he's a free token. This is the third copy, so I paid 3 points each for all 3 copies of Churda. So any damage they do is impressive. Oh, look at you. Thing of beauty. We'll play him and see what else we have in there, because I think, yeah. And my 6-point Termagant is doing 58 damage here, and this guy is already doing 64. Like, the damage is crazy, so we'll get that precision shot. Oh, right, the tokens don't have, oh, shoot. I messed that up. That's okay. The tokens don't have the traits. I was thinking that he was going to do precision shot on that guy on the left, and he obviously did not. That's right. I'll just melee them to death. And he's got the highest hit points and does plenty of damage. There we go. Yeah, like, look at these attack stats. This thing is doing 182 ranged or 173 melee, and he's a 40-point card. Like, his hit points do go down quite quickly, but look at that damage spread on, what is that, 15, 40, 55, plus 6, 61 points on the board, and I'm doing 400 damage without a ready bonus. Like, it's absolutely bananas. And I'm very pleased that this works out this way, because my Gosar is level 3. So if he hits the board, it's kind of a problem. He'll still swing for 200 native without a bonus, so he's no joke. And he's got Fear base, I believe has rank 2 Fear at level 3. So he's certainly no slouch, but he's still a lot more vulnerable than a lot of other warlords, and much more vulnerable than an 80-point warlord will be at like a decent level. So anyway, I am almost to, so I am recording this a little bit ahead. It is Wednesday, the third day of this official ladder season, and I'm already looking at 8,400 trophies. Probably will hit Terra tonight. Yeah, we're cruising. I mean it. I'm going to get Skarbrand, and I'm very excited about it. So, anyway, I wanted to talk about that. I'm very excited about Skarbrand, excited to ladder aggressively for the first time in a while, and wanted to share my process. So that's it. Good luck out there. Let me know what you're doing this season. That was the wrong button. Let's try it again.